All right, welcome to America This Week Live, Monday. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
That sounded a lot smoother than it actually was.
It was kind of light and bright, and I'm Walter Kern, like a children's show host.
like we didn't just have a massive emergency before this started. Uh, I was chasing something down and forgot that we were about to be on the air, and everybody was
Well, I
calling
was
me.
prepared with a strange monologue that I didn't have to use to cover for your absence.
Yeah, God, I'm getting a little bit more absent-minded as life goes on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lots to get to today. So, Walter, you can't really share much about your weekend, can you?
Well, I can share certain facts that are germane,
Okay.
given what the topic is tonight. Uh, Sunday, for reasons that are confidential, we live in a confidential world as journalists. It's not quite the spy world, but we can pretend sometimes. I was in Dallas, Texas. I had gone to Dallas, Texas Saturday at the behest of a source, and not knowing that I would end up Sunday morning in Dealey Plaza, the place where JFK was assassinated. It's a memorial now. I've never been there before. I got there about 10 in the morning because I was asked to listen to a presentation about the assassination by a
About the other assassination.
about the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I can't go into the details of the presentation because this person was putting together a video that I was allowed to witness and asked that its details be kept quiet until he presents them himself. I will say though that at 10:30 Sunday morning, I'm staring up at the Texas Book Depository, meditating on the window from which we're told, at least, and according to the conventional account, Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK. I'm also looking at the little storm drain in the highway nearby, where, according to some, a fatal shot
The
rang out.
unconventional wisdom.
According to the unconventional wisdom, and let's put it this way: the presentation that I got, in many respects, resembled the Oliver Stone movie. So there's
Okay.
that with a lot of added detail and other threads. But in any case, there I am, first visit to this hallowed ground, and I get back in the car and leave, get back to another location where I was asked to be, and hear that there has been an assassination attempt on Trump.
So that's a little freaky. Did you do a
It was
double
it
take?
was it was very freaky. It's the kind of thing that people point to as evidence for the simulation. I never think that way. I'm not a simulation guy for various reasons. I'd rather just go straight God, and not have it be some programmer from beyond sitting at a mega computer that's using a Dyson shield to harvest the energy of an entire planet and create our reality. No, if we're going to do that game, I'll just say God. But it was a big coincidence, let's put it that way. And it shook me up. It really did. Because I was born in 1962. I was born the year before the JFK assassination. And that mythos, that history, all the events that flowed from it, and all the kind of paranoia that flowed from it, frankly, and the uncertainty and the distrust and the suspicion that we don't get the full story, has been parallel with my lifetime. Okay.
Right.
And recently, I've got to say, I said this in jest today, but I kind of mean it. In the last 4 months, I feel like I've lived through the entire 1960s and half of the 1970s. Right up
Is
to
it
the
going? Is it going chronologically, or is it all kind of happening in
there. Well, we haven't had Altamont, we haven't had Woodstock. The music has not quite lived up to the.
Well, we kind of did the Altamont thing last week. we talked about the end of Fear and Loathing, because that was what he
Right.
was talking about, right? So
Right.
that's yeah. But we didn't get into we didn't have a massive crisis at a rock concert or anything like that.
Let's just say that this mini 60s and half of the 70s that we've been living since about May or April has lacked the soundtrack. You know, where's Gimme Shelter? I want to play Gimme Shelter nonstop. You know, where's Sympathy for the Devil?
Buffalo Springfield.
Where's Buffalo Springfield? You know, step out of line, the man comes and takes you away.
That's one thing I will say. Like, I didn't like the Donald Trump "I hate Taylor Swift" tweet, but where's the music, man? Like for this era, there's got to be something a little bit more hard edged, don't you think?
So
Even the '90s had Rage Against the Machine.
I have a thesis about the Taylor Swift tweet, but I'll get to it later.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I have a thesis about all the outrageous things that Donald Trump says that at the moment he says them seem crazy. Like, hey, they put a wiretap on me when I came into the White House. And everybody goes,
yes.
That's nuts. Or, you know, whatever it might be. They tend to have a long tail, his outrageous statements. In other words, they tend to be I think, the opening chapter in sagas rather than just one-off tweets that nobody can believe.
Right. Right.
And I think he's crazy like a fox with a lot of this stuff. I think he sometimes thinks that there's more news coming on a subject, and he opens up consciousness in this sort of brutal way by throwing a grenade of a tweet that will get the subject on the front page of the mind, even if you find it detestable, because he feels that later on that subject is going to somehow work to his favor.
So I'm kind of halfway with you on this. So like I think he sometimes does these things with calculation, and then sometimes it just kind of falls out of his head.
But against that thesis in this case, I would say he's been tweeting very scarcely for Donald Trump. You know, he just got back on Twitter, so I think he's rationing his tweets somewhat, and any one of them to me seems a little less likely to just be capricious than before, when he was, you know, shooting out 30 of them between 2 and 4 in the morning.
Yeah, he was how do we say? He was yanking that pretty hard once upon a time on Twitter, but
we'll see. We'll see in the case of Twitter, Taylor Swift, if it matures into anything.
Right, exactly. See if it achieves anything.
Right.
Well, we have a lot to get to in terms of what they're calling the apparent assassination attempt on the news.
I think we should put the word apparent in front of everything.
Everything, yeah.
The apparent Ukraine war.
The apparent election.
The apparent election. That's perfect. And then we should put experts say at the end after commas, which they've been doing with this apparent assassination attempt. You know, Trump survives apparent assassination attempt according to experts.
Yeah, that's right. According to experts. Yeah, that's a great headline format. Just to add that at the end of really anything. I had a friend who used to, a very eccentric friend who used to collect what he called comma self headlines.
What's that?
So man kills 7, comma dog, comma self, right? So anything that had comma self at the end, he would snip those. So we're going to get to all the apparent assassination attempt stuff, but we should point out that Trump is actually, as people are probably aware, he's doing an event right now. Can we check in? Is that possible to the Trump live stream?
Technologically possible.
Your unwavering support for our community has not gone unnoticed, and we're immensely grateful for it. And really, the fact that after all of this, you've chosen to proceed with this interview blows my mind. It speaks volume, Mr. President, and thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the remarks. It was quite something, but it worked out well, and Secret Service did an excellent job. And they have the man behind bars, and hopefully he's going to be there for a long time. Dangerous person, very, very dangerous person. But I appreciate the comments very much.
Well, I appreciate you for allowing me to interview you in your wonderful Mar-a-Lago home, which is truly an honor, and I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, I can say that myself, like I was saying, the crypto community and millions of Americans are relieved that you're here with us today after the second attempt on your life at the Trump National Golf Club. It's just horrifying. Can you run us through what happened?
So I was playing golf with some of my friends. It was on a Sunday morning, and very peaceful, very beautiful weather. Everything was beautiful. It was a nice place to be. And all of a sudden we heard shots being fired in the air, and I guess probably 4 or 5. And it sounded like bullets, but what do I know about that? But Secret Service knew immediately it was bullets. And they grabbed me, and I think probably the other one, Steve is one of the people, Steve Witkoff, a great friend of mine, a great businessman from mostly New York and Florida, great businessman. And more importantly, just a fantastic person. So we're in the group, and everybody we got into the carts and we moved along pretty good. I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. And what the gunfire was
we can come back to this, I guess, right?
Yeah, let's stop for a second, especially because the sound on Trump isn't so hot. But it's usually us who have technical difficulties. It's nice to see that the former president does. What he didn't say there was whether or not the shots, which the Secret Service recognized as gunfire, were shots unleashed by the Secret Service or the assassin. I'm still not clear about exactly what happened. Did the guy get off any shots or not?
There is a remarkable lack of clarity about many elements of the story.
Yes.
So far, although, look. I guess
which is a common investigative technique, right?
I guess you got to hold some things back.
Yeah, they hold some things back. They've got the guy, so they're interrogating him. Obviously,
ostensibly they've got the guy. Yeah,
ostensibly they've got the guy. Why do you say that, Matt?
Well, there's as opposed to some other situations, there's like a tiny bit of lack of clarity because he wasn't arrested at the scene, right? He was arrested a little bit farther away, and it relied upon a witness identifying him. But it, by all accounts, everything matches up. So there's nothing to suggest that he's not the guy. I'm just saying.
Well, but there is no reason to believe that we are certain that it's the guy either. And, in the history of presidential assassinations, including or attempted and actual, there is a bit of a problem with arresting people away from the scene.
Yes.
There was in Dallas. The fact that he was arrested much later in another place, a movie theater, has probably opened more speculative thinking than almost any other detail.
It is. It's a little weird. The whole story is a little weird. The idea that he camps out. I love the description by the BBC. The BBC said that he hid in a shrubbery. Mm-hmm. So they got that from I guess it was a quest for the Holy Grail, right? Mm-hmm. He hid in a shrubbery for 12 hours, and then an undetermined skirmish. Shots rang out. Shots were fired at a gunman. Then he skedaddles, gets in a car. He apparently drove very under control. Police wanted us to let us know that he might have gotten away if they hadn't had a tag and a description. Mm-hmm. And then, unlike some of these other stories, there's a pretty significant social media history for this person, and we know a lot about this person already. And boy, is it weird, Walter, the history of this Ryan Routh. And by the way, I've purposely forgotten his middle name already. Do you know it?
Totally forgotten.
Yeah.
I think there would be fewer assassinations if we forgot the middle name, because middle names seem to be a characteristic of assassins in the modern era. Well, going back to John Wilkes Booth, frankly, I mean, not to confuse him with any of the other John Booths at the time, I guess we use middle names for assassins so we don't confuse them with people who have the
with
name.
Other people, right? The other Lee Oswalds, the other James Rays,
right?
Right.
Exactly. Sirhan had no middle name. Sirhan James Sirhan. I hate to use this kind of humor, but you know, there it is.
Look, everything's on the table of this apparent year of ours,
according to experts.
So, I guess we just got to get into the coverage thing. Is a little bizarre. So, this jumped out at me right away. If we could look at the Ken Delanian this morning on Morning Joe, sort of got asked. And actually, if we could roll it, let's not roll it from the middle. Let's just start at the very beginning of this clip, because you know, it starts off as kind of a regular news report, and then he sort of just leaves out some details. So let's just roll. This is Ken Delanian, who's sort of the famed national security correspondent. Let's put it that way.
So let's bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian and State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg. Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, is with us as well. And Ken, I'll start with you. What more do we know about the suspect, his background, criminal history, political affiliations?
58-year-old Alan Wesley Routh is his name, Mika, and some things about him are coming into focus. We don't have a full picture yet, obviously, but we're seeing an extensive criminal history in North Carolina, where he used to live, including what looks like some felony convictions, one charge of possessing a weapon of mass destruction back in 2002. Unclear exactly what that was, and it's also unclear, therefore, how he was able to obtain what the police said was an AK-47 style rifle with felony convictions. It also appears that at some point he moved to Hawaii, or at least said on his LinkedIn profile he was living in Hawaii. And then he became very interested in the Ukraine war and in recruiting soldiers to fight in the Ukraine war. There's even evidence that he tried to fight in the Ukraine war. And there's actually a video online of him in Kyiv being interviewed by journalists where he talks about coming to Ukraine and trying to sign up to fight. But because he had no military experience, they didn't accept him as a fighter. He then turned to try to recruit other people, including he had this scheme to recruit Afghan fighters to come and support the Ukrainian cause. He was very anti-Russian President Vladimir Putin. There's actually a Twitter account that we're going through it, and includes a tweet that suggests that he voted for Donald Trump in 2016, but then became disillusioned with Mr. Trump, perhaps in part over the Ukraine issue, and became very frustrated with Mr. Trump. There's also a lot of very weird stuff, frankly, on the Twitter account, including a tweet urging North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un to come to Hawaii. So it does appear this guy was not all there. And then we have just the facts that the police have released. He was preparing to film this incident with a GoPro.
Okay.
Lying.
All right. Look, and if we could look at the tweet that he just showed, he did tweet this thing about voting for Trump in 2016, Ryan Routh.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, here it is. While you were my choice in 2018, I and the world had hoped that President Trump would be different and better than the candidate, but we were all greatly disappointed.
What's the date on this tweet, by the way? I can't see it closely.
This is this year. This is it's 6/20. So that's at the end of Trump's first term.
Over
June
4 years old.
Yeah. So it's a 4-year-old tweet. But Ken leaves out, look, I don't know how much stock to put in this person's Twitter history, because I just have a tough time even accepting this as a real person, frankly. He's so weird. But one of his last tweets is basically just like a compilation of Democratic talking points, and they kind of leave that one out.
And at what date is that tweet?
So that one was in, hang on a second, it was in April
of this year.
Yeah, April of this year. And if we could just look at democracy on the ballot, and Walter, as you know, I'm on a gazillion political lists, so I'm constantly reading all these stupid mailers that come out by all the parties, right? All the Republican ones. And so here's the tweet. It's I think from earlier this year in April. But they've taken down his Twitter history. Right. Your campaign should be, he tweets at Biden, at POTUS, your campaign should be called something like CADAF, Keep America Democratic and Free. Trump's should be MASA, Make Americans Slaves Again, Master. Democracy is on the ballot and we cannot lose. We cannot afford to fail. The world is counting on us to show the way. And the first one, not really. There's a few places where you see people saying keep America democratic, but democracy is on the ballot. Even we cannot lose, which I didn't highlight there. We cannot afford to fail, and the world is counting on us. They're all like very common Democratic Party talking points that you see in mailers. If we could scroll down a little bit here, a little more. So this is from the DLC's mailers. You see democracy on the ballot. Everyone's heard that a gazillion times. That's like, they have this on there, what they call the talkers' top lines, the daily talking points. And here's another one. Here are 5 stories to amplify from the states, right? And they quote, this year, the survival of our democracy on our ballot. You can go down again. There's more of those, right?
So those are, I'm seeing ones from 2023, democracy on the ballot.
Oh yeah, they go back a couple of years actually.
Because I was going to say, Matt, we would have cracked the case if we could establish that these talking points appeared first in his tweet and only later became part of, mailers.
Right.
But apparently that's not true. So we'll throw out that theory.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean. The democracy on the ballot thing, I didn't even think that was terribly weird because it's in the air so much that almost anybody could repeat that. But the other stuff kind of freaked me out because I've seen these so much. If we could go down even a little bit more, just quickly to show people, "We cannot lose" is actually a pretty common Biden tagline. That he says in speeches. You can hear, this is a quick clip if you want.
I don't understand that. Shouldn't it be "we must not lose"?
I think so.
Because "we must not lose" would suggest we have to lose. We have to win. "We cannot lose" sort of means like there's some room for suspicion there. Like the election is already decided. We cannot lose. I can't lose.
It's a strange thing to repeat, and I always thought it was weird, which is one of the reasons why it jumped out at me when I saw that tweet. But yeah, if we could play it.
This is not just a campaign. This is more of a mission. We cannot lose this campaign for the good of the country. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's not about me. It goes well beyond me. It goes about the country. And I think everybody knows it, and I think people are beginning to dawn on people.
All right, so then
Well, it did.
Yeah, the next one there is actually like a White House poll report that I remembered seeing, like "we cannot lose this campaign." And then this other stuff, this Protect the Vote campaign, "we cannot lose" is a tagline that for a mailer campaign for lots of different Democratic candidates. So you see "we cannot lose" there. Then there's another Senate race, "we cannot lose," blah, blah, blah. "We cannot afford to fail" is another thing you see constantly in fundraising campaigns. There's a Democratic Power Project. There's another one called, what's it called? Occupy Democrats, No Vote Left Behind. And then there's one more, Biden's something, I forget what it's called. then there's also this whole thing about like the world is counting on us. Gretchen Whitmer just said it like 10 minutes ago. This is from her speech introducing Tim Waltz, I believe, from over the weekend. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but the point is, this is a thing that they say a lot.
Right.
The world is counting on us. Hillary Scholten and Alyssa Slotkin are counting on us. Our Democratic candidates for the Michigan House are counting on us. Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are counting on us.
Anyway, I don't know, Walter. Is that interesting or not? I can't tell, but it's certainly weird to kind of for Ken to leave that out and for MSNBC to leave.
I would say fair is fair, not just fair is fair, but if you're going to do forensic analysis of people's social media, I should think that the most recent social media would be of more interest than the 4-year-old social media posts. And so I see it as completely legitimate to inspect the more recent ones. And I find it interesting that if he is some kind of Manchurian candidate, let's say, some kind of programmable being who is absolutely reflecting the stochastic, the stochastic messages in the atmosphere, and that's a serious theory with everybody these days. I don't know who brought it up, this stochastic terrorism business in the last few years, but you know, it has been gospel almost that what is in the atmosphere will settle in the individual, and that somehow what you put in the atmosphere should be understood to lead to the worst possible outcomes. Now, of course, nobody actually believes it. It's always just retconned. When something happens, people find a stochastic reason for it. But when they're saying, you know, Trump is Hitler, they're not also adding, this will probably lead to an assassination attempt, as happened with Hitler, in fact, and as is often discussed in the thought experiment, what if you could kill Hitler? But
right, yes.
So everybody's stochastic terrorism isn't equal, in other words. But that this guy was a veritable receptacle for the unfiltered rhetoric of the party is kind of amazing. I mean, it speaks to his state of mind. It also speaks to the question of whether he has one, or is he simply, you know,
like a lump of nerve?
Is he sort of a piece of human carbon paper? You know,
right?
You know, that they put slogans out and it just goes straight in.
Yeah,
did he ever mention fair play for Cuba? That's a JFK joke. But
was he handing out leaflets?
Yeah, but he was a leaflet hander-outer kind of person, actually. I mean, I think that of all the characters we've had lately who've pulled this kind of thing, he most resembles Oswald. Yeah, he's a guy who went abroad. Oswald, remember, defected to Russia.
Yep.
He's a guy who apparently had deep convictions that he proselytized for. Oswald wanted a fair shake for Castro, apparently. He would at least hand these out. And in the annals of JFK research, it's often thought that the trail of breadcrumbs that Lee Harvey Oswald left was meant to either obscure or point to certain conclusions. That, in other words, he left clues that were quite obvious, and people say, oh, you know, he made himself out to be this leftist, but maybe he did that in order to obscure the fact that he was in the employ of right-wing or military industrial complex interests.
Yeah, Oswald's biography is one of those things where you think if you were scripting that as a screenwriter, you'd be demerited by a professor or a teacher because it's too ridiculous, right? You know, the guy defecting to Minsk and coming back with a Belarusian wife and all of these things, and you know, being in the Marines and passing out leaflets for, you know, anti-Castro movements after allegedly being a communist. It's just too strange, right?
Trying to go to the Mexican embassy, trying to go to the U.S. embassy in Mexico City to deliver some urgent message.
Right. This guy has a lot. This guy, look.
But this guy
it's a bad movie.
This guy has what people in his role recently have not had, which is an incredible paper trail of absolutely overt political statements. You know, they might not be go Democrat, go Republican, but they have to do with issues. And he has been interviewed by, I believe, CBS. I believe he was in a New York Times article at one point. I believe he was in a Newsweek article. At least that's what I've gathered from the last few days of reading on this, or the last day, because everything seems like a few days, but this was yesterday, right?
Yeah, and he was in a like a public service announcement for the Azov Battalion or something like that, right? This bizarre little commercial.
Right. So he's what all Americans aspire to be, a left-wing Nazi.
Right.
You know? What all American kooks end up being, you know, a socialist who loves, you know, the SS. But in any case, you do look at this and kind of go like, the lady doth protest too much. Why has he left all these glaring, you know, neon sign style? I
mean, he's literally a human avatar. He's got his hair is blue and yellow.
Right. And he wears a flag. You know, and is that camouflage, or is it genuine? You know, mixed up, good old American nuttiness.
This doesn't feel like good old American nuttiness. This feels like another brand of nuttiness. But just quickly, so that people don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say with all those talking points things. You know, we're both writers. I'm very sensitive to the language that people use.
Yes.
When people use dead phrases that are not their own, like, it hits my ear in this way that is very like discordant. It like bothers me like nails on a blackboard. And so when people repeat phrases that someone else is trying to get them to use, like promoting political violence, right? That's a huge DLC talking point. After the debate, the Republicans were saying 3-on-1 everywhere, 3 against 1 everywhere, right? You hear it when people use these phrases. When there's a whole mess of them, that tells you that there's something wrong with the person, right? And they're not using their own language.
Right. And what's also interesting is that in other posts, he's not very cogent to me. But in this post, he's very cogent because he copy-pasted, you know, very simple mottos and slogans. But like all of this is just speculation. All of this is a kind of, how can I put it? A mental potpourri triggered by past assassinations, past lone nuts. You know, I like to say America specializes in the motiveless political assassination. And that's a cynical statement.
No, you said that after the last one.
I said it after the last one because I said, what is it about America that our political assassinations never have political motives? But of course they do. You know, I don't believe that many people, or let's say entities, take the trouble of trying to kill a U.S. president or a senator or whatever without a motive. But there's something about America, and I don't want to go into it because it'll make me sound a little nutty, that causes us to think that they're all the result of psychosis rather than people getting things done that they want done.
And I have to say that my thinking on this evolved after I lived in Russia, because I remember seeing when JFK came out and everybody was talking about the assassination. You know, suddenly people who didn't believe there was an issue before. We're like, you really can't get off that many shots with that rifle. And they were talking like that. And, this whole idea that, Jack Ruby, there was something really weird about it. And my very skeptical mind was like, nah, come on. Like, there's no way it's any kind of inside job. Then I went to Russia, and it was like they have a lot of assassinations.
But they tend not to be lone nuts, do they?
They're not lone nuts. And then 8 days later, you read that an accident befell them, the suspect in prison, and it's just kind of par for the course. Or they were found, they were tracked down by police, and they died in a gunfight or something like that.
Right.
And you never once does it cross your mind like, oh, this is just sort of an innocent thing. Because in Russia, always like you can set your watch by when the guy gets blasted in the head out, right? Even when the assassination happens.
2 weeks before you go, he's getting close to the line. 1 week before you go, he just crossed the line, and then the next week you go, now he just got shot. The last, I think, just absolutely overt political assassination in America, one we can all agree was not the result of nuttery, was Lincoln. I mean, people forget that was a wide conspiracy to kill people other than Lincoln, kind of bring down the government, the constitutional government. And, it was committed by people who were avenging the Confederacy. We learn, or
right?
Experts say. But in any case, since then, since then, it's always some goofball, and it makes it hard to understand our own history when it seems to only be the product of insanity, rather than malice aforethought and so on, and premeditation. And if we were abroad, I always think, let's look at our big critical moments as if we were sitting in Vietnam reading the paper and we were Vietnamese, or sitting in Russia or in France. It would not surprise anyone over there that Donald Trump is, suffering assassination attempts. He's this incredibly controversial populist candidate, at least as it's portrayed, and I don't think they're surprised at all. And I think
they're probably not surprised by Jeffrey Epstein.
No, and I think they'd probably smile when they hear, "Oh, it was another nut."
Yeah, and there's just too much stuff in the ether. Do you object to me showing the tweet about the Hayden thing?
No.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, why object? I mean, Matt, we're practicing absolutely orthodox cable news journalism here and showing these things.
Exactly. So before the assassination attempt,
the day before,
okay. And if we could zoom in on this. So this is a former head of the CIA, General Michael Hayden, retweeting this meme about, long after this moron is dead, history will remember the cowards who kept quiet and let this go on. And it's a picture of all the Republicans who didn't, I guess mostly Republicans on that list, right? Who didn't stop him.
Who didn't do what? What were they supposed to do?
I don't know. Stop him, I guess.
How? By letting him not run?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to hear Rachel say essentially the same thing later. But so then Michael Hayden, who's a very aggressive tweeter,
right.
And this is a very significant person in American history. He was the head of the NSA, too, and he oversaw the Stellar Wind program that Edward Snowden uncovered. So he's both kind of the father of mass surveillance, and he's one of the kind of leaders of the drone assassination phenomenon.
Well, let's just imagine, Matt, that the day before Kennedy was assassinated, Alan Dulles, I keep confusing him with his brother, Alan Dulles, also a former CIA head, had tweeted above long after this moron with a picture of JFK is dead, etc.
And then I have all the names.
Now, would that seem significant in retrospect?
You would think.
Also, yes, it would. Also, what business does he have as a former intelligence head casting suspicion on a whole series, a couple dozen or whatever, dozen and a half American politicians who are still serving, suggesting that their day is coming? Because what he said, remember what he said? He said, I have all the names. I have all the names. In other words, you guys, your days are numbered. That was a warning. Come on.
Yeah.
When he says I have all the names, he's suggesting that list overlaps with the list that's in the tweet that he's retweeting. Is he not?
Of course, yes. And I
did Joseph McCarthy ever do anything that blatant?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't live through that period, but
I've seen all the movies.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I've seen, I've read about it. He'd hold up envelopes and he'd say the State Department is filled with da-da-da. But did he put his imprimatur on actual public, it looked like a Most Wanted poster. It was meant to evoke a Most Wanted poster.
Yeah, I mean, he's like marking all these people with, it's Apocalypse Now. He's throwing death cards.
Or a Western, poster, wanted dead or alive. Mm-hmm. Skinny Mason and his accomplices.
I mean, we're laughing, but it's really kind of not funny.
I don't find it funny at all. In fact, I find it a terrible development, which is meant to promote a kind of numbness and fear. When you don't know whether to take things seriously or not, and then you see these things happen the day before an assassination attempt. Do you remember back when Gabby Giffords was shot and Sarah Palin was somehow tied to it for having made a campaign poster or something that had crosshairs over parts of America?
Yep. Yeah, and actually, I'm pretty sure my father got assigned to do a story about that.
How far we've come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was pretty mild compared to this. Or John Brennan, remember talking about the Ides of March? For the people in the Trump family, or I guess he didn't actually name the people for whom the indictments were coming, but
as I remember, and the audience can correct me, Alexander Soros with a very sort of free associative tweet back when that showed broken glass as though shot by a bullet, and some money and something that added up to 45, and which people almost instantly took as some kind of like there's a bounty on President 45.
Yeah, like, what is this behavior from people in this position?
They want us to live in a spy novel. It's clear,
right? I mean, I think they really love the fact that people are talking about this and that there's all this discussion about various aspects of the spy world and everything. But they also love being on TV. I mean, we can look at. Let's look at the Juliette Kayyem thing. This is the former deputy assistant. I think it's the assistant secretary for policy at DHS, and she had some complaints about the second assassination attempt.
I really, I don't care what you feel about him or Harris. I mean, this is the expectation that he will be safe, and the reason why this is, in some ways, you said how close the election is. The problem is this is a safety issue that is being thrown into a very intense political environment in which the very fact of an assassination, a constitutional moment, because it could have impacted voters, will be used for political purposes, and that to me is just exceptionally unfortunate, because whatever your beliefs are, we do deserve to have campaigns that are not where violence isn't being used as either a sword or a shield.
So yeah, she's just complaining. She's complaining that people are using the assassination as a political talking point
In the
or assassination attempt.
Yeah, and remember, assassination attempt 1, when it yielded these stirring photos of Trump against the flag and so on. You and I were at the RNC in Milwaukee, and I did a TV show, and one of the topics, it was a Wednesday night after the Saturday when the assassination attempt had taken place. One of the topics that night was some unknown editor of a major news organ, maybe a magazine, maybe a cable channel, had suggested that these photos be suppressed because they were likely to lead to sympathy for Trump.
Right,
basically.
right.
And
Yeah.
what she just said is it's unfortunate that somebody's bringing guns onto golf courses to kill and hiding in the bushes to try to kill presidents and so on. But what's really unfortunate is that it might influence votes.
Right, right. Yeah, it's going to have a political influence. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah, and look, and then Brennan came out, and he was on Ali Velshi yesterday, and gave a. First of all, why is John Brennan? Why are these people on TV? It freaks me out.
Matt, these back in the Kennedy days, these were the silent people.
Right?
America wasn't even sort of supposed to know who they were that much. They weren't supposed to be on the tips of everybody's tongue. John Dulles and John McCone, who I believe was acting CIA director at the time of the assassination. Imagine him going on TV.
Yeah, and
after having absolutely clear-cut records of hostility to the victim. Because one thing that people forget about the Kennedy assassination, they see it in a distorted way. They think John F. Kennedy was this incredible American romantic leading man, hero president who everybody loved, who was cut down. But that's not the case. He's a guy who barely squeaked into the presidency, some say with the help of
cheating,
fraud and cheating. Yeah, probably one of the most acknowledged instances of cheating in a presidential election by, ordinary historians. And he comes in at a time of incredible anti-communism in America and is thought to be rather soft on them, by many. And so at the time he was cut down, he was not America's, across the spectrum poster boy for wonderfulness. He was controversial.
Yeah. Not as controversial as Trump, but certainly within the government.
He was a guy who it was actually said might be more loyal to the Pope than he is to the American nation because he's our first Catholic president. Commie John was also a big trope. He had failed to do certain things that, let's say the right wing or the military industrial complex would have liked. Some would have said, don't go to Texas even. They don't like you there. And a lot of people didn't. So we forget that assassinations happen in times of controversy.
Yes, and look, well, I don't want to go there because this whole subject is such a minefield. But let's just say it's a little troubling that all these intelligence figures are constantly commenting on these situations.
What did Brennan say? I forget now.
Well, let's look at number 4. Here's where he talks about how we need to it's a gun problem.
Finally, I think it shows that, we are a country awash in guns, including a lot of these high-powered assault rifles.
The nodding.
Allow individuals, mentally disturbed or otherwise, to be able to take matters into their own hands and engage in these awful acts of political violence. So, again, the law enforcement authorities, Secret Service, and others have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, okay, so that's that.
I just want to fact check John Brennan on this. What kind of firearm killed Abraham Lincoln? Does anybody know?
I actually don't know what kind.
It was a tiny pocket pistol, the kind of thing ladies carry in their purses. There was no scope, and I'm going to add something that Americans, I think, also have forgotten, that John Wilkes Booth was one of the most famous American entertainers of his time. It was like Paul Newman or Robert Redford had assassinated the president. It really was. He was an actor. They've shown in the past that they can change history using very tiny firearms too. I just want to lay that out.
Yeah, and look, okay, so Brennan's on TV there. But I just can't get it out of my mind also that Brennan's former chief of staff or whatever, Jeremy Bash, is the ex-husband of Dana Bash, who's just such a prominent figure in
It's a small world, Matt.
Yeah, it's a pretty small world, isn't it?
When you get to the top of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, when you get up toward the eye, the all-seeing eye part of that pyramid, it's a small world.
Yeah, I remember reading the fabled 51 spies letter, and then I see the Jeremy Bash name in there, and I'm like, okay, the guy's he's already like a contributor to MSNBC, but everybody's married to everybody else in Washington. That part freaks me out too. I mean, I knew a Senate aide. Actually, I'm so afraid that I'm like a reputational cancer to people that I don't want to plug his book. But he wrote a great book, and one of the key points of it was that basically everybody's married to everybody else in DC, and that's the key to understanding how things get done, because it has nothing to do with party at all. You just have to get 6 people from this camp on board, and they'll get their spouses on board.
Well, I mean, the one can do what the other can't legally.
Right.
They can't testify against each other.
Right.
And if you're over there running the Federal Reserve, say, and your wife is over there being Andrea Mitchell, for example, it creates a whole world of influence that you might not have if you were just a bachelor running the Federal Reserve, or just Andrea Mitchell without Alan Greenspan as a husband.
Right, just a very small person who speaks in obscure phrases and isn't married to.
So there's my recommendation. Mm-hmm. The Catholic Church was very smart in requiring celibacy of priests. They couldn't play this game of, conspiring with the spouse to do what they can't do.
That's right.
I think enforced celibacy for the top 500 politicians in America should be, all senators, all congressmen, especially chairmen of committees, all should be forced to be celibate. And if you run and you're not celibate, you should have to divorce first.
That's a great idea. That's a great rule. That reminds me of, remember who wrote the book The Secrets of the Temple? Hang on a sec. This was, Bill Grider. Jeez, God, how can I forget that? Former, Rolling Stone writer, among other things. But he wrote this book about the Fed, and I think I've told this story, but the editors at Rolling Stone used to have a thing that if you could successfully shoplift this book because it was so big, that they would buy each other lunch. So it's gigantic. But one of the things about one of his themes in the book is that the Fed was organized exactly like the Catholic Church. Like the organizational structure had like a pope and cardinals and and everything. Maybe we should do that with just government in general, right? And then enforce celibacy on all of them.
Well, I think at least celibacy. Pyramidal structures. I've got a friend, he's a friend of yours too. He's a younger reporter, kind of specializes. He has a Twitter account called the Hunt for Tom Clancy.
Oh, yes.
And he sort of specializes in warped, through the looking glass, conspiratorial, but actually factual stories about America.
And the funny thing is he's like a respected and great academic too.
Right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But he has one phobia, I know him well, and he says anything involving a pyramid is bad. Okay. and he's so pyramid phobic that even the Vegas shooting, which people don't realize occurred next to the Luxor pyramid-shaped hotel, gives him chills.
Wow.
He even feels that the Bass Pro Shop pyramid near Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis, of course, being an Egyptian name originally.
Yeah. Right. God, we can't forget that.
Right. On the American Nile, the Mississippi River, is itself something that we should dig deeper into.
Somebody's trying to send a message.
Right.
It's an alien antenna
right.
underneath it all. Well, before we go sort of check out MSNBC, could we I want to see maybe the changeover if we can. But can we look at somebody did a compilation of basically Nicole Wallace and Rachel and their reaction to the assassination attempt. And look, there are a lot of people who are wailing about this online, but it was interesting.
It's not just that Donald Trump poses a threat to democracy. It's that Donald Trump only cares about himself. This is a populist looking to serve his own interest and harm other people and dismantle our democracy and make it just about himself. This is a guy who's doing it on behalf of Putin.
Do you think Trump cares about any of his supporters? I think he's only ever cared about himself. He's still a greasy pig.
He's still a greasy pig.
He said that a hallmark of strongman leaders is they don't care about their followers. Loathes Donald Trump. Things like a lunatic and a criminal, someone corrupt who's bankrupted people. That the goal for all of us to save our republic has to be to keep Donald Trump far away, make sure he never gets anywhere near the Oval Office again.
The threat that Donald Trump is to this nation.
Cult of authoritarian personality in league with autocrats and kleptocrats and dictators all over the world. Everybody has to follow Donald Trump like a monarch. That's what the election is going to be about. Democracy and freedom versus dictatorship and authoritarianism.
We want to remain a democracy, or do we want to take this hard turn into an autocracy and taking direct aim at our democracy? Autocratic leaning remarks he has made in recent weeks and months, such as ones that echo Hitler.
Extreme measures taken to fundamentally change the course of the country, or we're all going to die, to get rid of the form of government that we have and install something else.
To the degree that the country's in any decline, it is the threat of a second Trump term. America becoming a threat, which is what it becomes, a threat to the world order if Trump is reelected, is a known, to quote Don Rumsfeld. America can survive one Trump term. It won't survive a second.
It was a primary, didn't work out to oust Donald Trump. There was a chance for leaders like Mitch McConnell to literally have Donald Trump barred from ever holding federal office again. They didn't do it. The Republican Party will not save us here. We cannot wait for the Republican Party to wake up. Nothing is going to happen inside the Republican Party other than efforts to get Donald Trump what he wants, which is to get rid of our form of government. The only way the country gets saved is if Republicans. Our project of the Republican Party is to install a strongman form of government in the United States and get.
So that's what it's like 1 hour of coverage, and that's all the messaging. And the point of, I guess, the point.
This is all from the same day.
Yeah, I think it's all from the same day, if I remember correctly. I better make sure that I'm right about that. But
I want to do what's called laying down a marker so that I am coherent to our listeners and to people who might see this in the future. Part of my point of view on this campaign and our politics in general is informed by the fact that I simply don't believe Donald Trump is going to become a dictator. I believe that to be one of the most incendiary talking points of my lifetime. I see it repeated everywhere. I see the evidence for it as slim to none. It usually involves taking out of context something he said. But because I can't personally fear this outcome, which they are declaring as certain. They're declaring it as certain. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I'm just saying I don't think it could happen. I don't think it's any more likely than, that our last president would be taken out silently in a coup and replaced by somebody after it was too late for the Democratic Party. I am not, in other words, not being able to buy into this panic really places me at odds with almost everybody that, makes a lot of money in the job that we don't make a lot of money in.
Well, right, yeah. Even the relatively, it starts with a relatively mild. Let's watch the transition.
Probably get started tonight. Right now it is Monday night, which is when you are used to seeing me here on the TV machine. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Here it is. But this week I will also be here on Friday. We're doing a special edition of the Rachel Maddow Show at the end of this week on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Really earning that $20 million.
9 p.m. Eastern on Friday, right after.
Maybe it'll be another assassination.
Maybe she gets overtime.
Show, we're going to be showing my new movie, my new documentary, which is called From Russia with Lev. It is about the first Trump impeachment and what was both so terrible and equally so stupid about that entire scandal. So in case you want to pop it in your calendar, or set the DVR right now. Again, I am here tonight as normal, but then you will get a second Rachel Maddow Show this week at 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday.
Okay, let's just stop.
Right
for
after
a second.
No, we got to get it.
At 9 p.m. Eastern on Friday, you can see my new movie, From Russia with Lev.
From Russia with Lev. Tonight, oh my God.
Who is that guy? Who is the picture?
Fraught and unnerving place that we are in American news and politics, and frankly, in American life right now.
Hillary Clinton's coming up.
Last time there were multiple assassination plots against a president or presidential candidate in such quick succession.
I remember exactly when they were, Rachel, and you won't believe it.
Years ago. It was 49 years ago this month, in fact, in September 1975.
Yes.
President Gerald Ford.
The incredibly controversial Gerald Ford.
California, when a fanatical follower of Charles Manson pulled out a .45 and pointed it at him.
Right.
Then not even 3 weeks later, also in California, but in another city in San Francisco, another woman actually did fire 2 shots at President Ford in close proximity at a hotel in San Francisco. Both of the shots that she fired from her .38 Special went wide after a gay U.S. Marine combat veteran saw what she was trying to do, saw her pull out the gun, and he knocked her arm while she fired, and that is why she missed.
Very important that he was gay.
So President Ford was not hurt in either of those attempts, but they came in very quick succession. And in September 1975, the country was very deeply unnerved by having 2 different crazy people pull a gun on the president of the United States twice in the space of a month.
But there was a big difference, Rachel.
Since then.
He wasn't in the act of campaigning for an election that was about to happen in
Donald
2
Trump
months.
While he was golfing in Florida yesterday. We have had the second instance in the space of 9 weeks of former president and presidential candidate Donald Trump being threatened by a potential assassin.
Yes.
Now, Trump, of course, is fine. The man with the gun at Trump's golf course apparently never actually fired his gun before the Secret Service spotted him and they shot at him. The man is in custody. He's already facing federal gun charges with presumably more to follow. But this is just obviously absolutely terrible news. It is terrible news for everybody.
For the Harris campaign.
It's terrible news for where we are at as a country. It's terrible news in terms of
No, she's going to turn it around.
Service is contending with. It's also the worst of all possible wild cards in a political season that's already quite wild and not in a good way.
Dude, Matt, have you not learned yet?
God.
It was 1 month ago, almost exactly, when Trump disparaged Americans who have received the nation's highest military honor,
Okay,
the
all
Medal of
right,
Honor.
I lose.
Dude, come on.
Saying
He kind of deserved it,
recipients of that
right?
award were killed or injured in the process of earning that award, and so other medals, like the one he gave
Okay.
Okay, wait, I got to
his
see.
biggest campaign donor,
How far will she take it? Come on, dude.
All right. I'll put it back.
punishing thing for anybody in American public life to say, even anybody in private life to say, let alone somebody who is a former president and wants to be president again. Just an astonishingly offensive and ignorant remark against Americans who are literally the most decorated military heroes in our nation.
3 minutes and a half to get there?
Only 10 days later, his campaign
It's going to get worse.
Shoved an employee at Arlington National Cemetery when she tried to stop Trump and his team from filming political campaign videos at Arlington, which you are not allowed to do for all the obvious reasons, not just because it's the rules, but because it's obviously the only decent thing to do.
Right.
Unbelievable.
In short order, after those two things, one of the headline primetime speakers from Trump's nominating convention did a 2-hour gushing interview.
Somebody Trump knew did something wrong too.
And Trump's running mate nevertheless decided to go ahead with his own appearances with that RNC speaker.
Oh my God.
I mean, each of those things is sort of astonishing for any presidential candidate, for any political campaigner of any kind, honestly, for anybody in American public life. Any one of those things would be such an astonishing scandal to drag with you into whatever else you wanted to do next in your life. But those three things in quick succession are what Trump brought with him into the first and potentially his only debate with Vice President Kamala Harris. And that debate was a disaster for him. It was a debacle. ABC Ipsos polling shows Vice President Kamala Harris.
You can get anywhere from anywhere. This proves. Okay. Start anywhere and go anywhere.
Alone, just on the economy, post-debate polling shows Kamala Harris pulling ahead of and away from Trump in terms of who the country trusts the most on the economy. That's just one of the metrics that has gone completely south for Trump following that disastrous debate. National polling of the presidential race also started consistently showing Vice President Harris beating former President Trump.
And thus what?
And since that terrible debate performance, his campaign and his campaign appearances have been just shambolic.
Really?
He said after the debate that ABC, the host of the debate, should have its broadcast license revoked.
This is like when
he regularly threatens this now against any media outlet that airs anything that he does not like.
To kill it.
He said that after the debate, his opponent must have had magic earrings on at the debate that somehow fed her the right answers in that debate.
Is this going to come back to the?
He told a campaign rally that California, the state of California, has a giant faucet. That was his phrase, a faucet with a handle that he said is the size of a building. It's such a big faucet with such a big handle that it takes a whole day to turn the faucet on or off. And he said that faucet, which he has invented, that is how California dumps all of Canada's water into the sea. And when he's president, that faucet won't turn the water into the sea anymore.
Okay.
What are you talking about? He invited a musical artist named Nicky Jam to join him on stage at another rally.
How dare he?
Said, you know, Nikki, she's hot. Nicky Jam then joined former President Trump on stage and surprised him very much by being a man. Trump brought out an outspoken.
Let's go back to the earrings.
And 9/11 conspiracy theorist to the 9/11 commemoration in Lower Manhattan.
So she's basically saying,
made a series of viciously, almost astonishingly racist statements about how terrible it would be to have Kamala Harris in the White House, where she already is, because Harris is of Indian descent on her mother's side. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, was asked to comment, particularly because his wife is also of Indian descent.
This is impressive.
Whoa.
He smiled and swallowed.
And they
and said,
accuse
"I don't think
Republicans
that's
of
insulting."
connecting the dots in a
For what it's
paranoid
worth,
fashion.
These comments were wildly and profoundly and baldly insulting to anyone of Indian descent. And whether or not J.D. Vance cares about that, there are very large Indian American constituencies in important swing states like, say, Georgia and North Carolina. They are likely to care.
Okay.
NPR also just
I gotta
revealed days ago
apologize
that
to our-
Trump's New
to
Jersey
our,
Golf Club twice this summer hosted this man. The one with the Hitler haircut and Hitler mustache. He was convicted 5 times over for his behavior during the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. His trial invoked previous statements of his like, quote, Hitler should have finished the job, and quote, babies born with any deformities or disabilities should be shot in the forehead.
Walter, I'm kind of speechless.
This
at
man
this.
posted a lengthy video online in 2020 about what he called the, quote, Jewish invasion of New Jersey. He compared Jewish people to a, quote, plague of locusts. And then Trump hosted him twice at his New Jersey golf club at Bedminster this summer. The second appearance of the Hitler mustache guy at Trump's club was followed the very next day by Trump hosting at that same club an anti-Semitism event. The day after the Hitler mustache guy, the day after the Jewish invasion of New Jersey guy.
Okay.
So it's not going to go.
We're going to need a bigger bowl of spaghetti and a bigger wall to throw it at.
Okay. I think we got to let our yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay, Matt, that left the planet, it went into orbit, and then it threw a black hole into a whole other universe of what? Was it free association? Was it suggesting that, of course Trump keeps getting shot at. He deserves it. That was basically what it said. I mean,
was that the point? I thought her point was that it's a political
we should be sad that he's not dead.
No, we should be sad that it happened because it might cause people to vote for him.
But she never actually said that earlier.
Well, she said it's a political wild card.
Well,
right?
Okay, so we also had Lester Holt who linked this, and I'm surprised she didn't. I'm sure she's getting there to the Springfield, Ohio, they're eating cats thing.
Yes.
You know, because that was on the Holt broadcast, the total context for this assassination attempt.
While you talk, I'll find that. Go
okay.
ahead. Mm-hmm.
I really want to give the devil its due here and say, what in the hell was she talking about? So we had statements by Laura Loomer, statements by Tucker Carlson, known associates of Trump.
And Hitler mustache guy.
We had a guy with a Hitler mustache. We don't know if he showed up with a Hitler mustache at Bedminster. We don't know what hosting him means. Does that mean he's allowed to play golf there? He was at a party. You know, woe to those who have large golf courses and facilities that. But even if you are the most rabid Trump-hating person in the world, okay, that was incoherent and far-fetched and not a story about an assassination attempt at all. But it began as one in some fashion. I mean, I think there is actually some form of math in which you count the number of pathways that you can go from one point to another. You know, it's not topology, right, but it's kind of like that. And this was a wonder of that sort of mathematics. I flunked math, so yeah. Maybe we have some like programmer or math genius.
Yeah. Does anybody out there know what kind of math that is?
Yes.
How would we chart that? So rhetorically,
if we did a chart of that, it would look like that True Detective Matthew McConaughey wall of clues.
Oh,
you know, where he
Great
goes
show.
Crazy, starts smoking cigarettes, has a drinking problem, and creates a huge, map of suspicion.
Right, with the antlers and the little twirly branch things.
I defy the autists, as they say in the audience, to actually map that chain of associations. You know.
So, from a standpoint of making an argument,
there was no argument.
Well, that's my point is that you and I are both used to the method of starting at a place and having it go somewhere, and then kind of tying it up in the end. And maybe she did eventually tie it up.
Oh, I'm sure she did. But you know, there are two kinds of logic: deductive and inductive. You know, there was no deductive logic at all to that you know, involves the syllogism and things like that. You know, necessary conclusions reached from certain assumptions. Inductive logic is taking a bunch of examples of something and trying to divine what they have in common. That was neither.
Yes, I think this is this would be a good moment to recall Fenimore Cooper's literary offenses. Hang on a second.
Matt, if Donald Trump gave a speech of that associative form, it would be called evidence of dementia. It would be exhibit A in the case against him having a functioning mind. But when Rachel does it, I don't know what it is, what you call it.
So she delivered it with verve, but look, I read this as every young writer has to read this because it's got basically the rules of argument, right? And they're ingenious. But the first rule, there are 19 rules governing literary art and domain, and some say 22. Cooper violated 18 of them, and the first one is
this is Mark Twain.
Yeah, a tale shall accomplish something and arrive somewhere, but the Deerslayer tale accomplishes nothing and arrives in air. So yeah, that was looking like it was going to arrive in air, I think.
Sound and fury signifying nothing. Shakespeare would also apply, I think, in this case. And you know, I don't mean to take any one of those instances and, you know, excuse it. But I do mean to take the fact that it started as some kind of comment on an attempted assassination and ended up with a kind of the sort of list of sins that might be used in an excommunication from the Catholic Church or something. You did this, you said this, you defied this principle, anyway, there it is.
Very strange. So,
and it's all a setup for an appearance by Hillary Clinton, by the way, which was being promoted down in the corner there.
Oh, yeah. I'll see if I can find that. Hang on a second. In the meantime, I think we should at least talk about this address that Trump gave with this promise to deport Haitians, which everybody's getting on him about the Taylor Swift thing, but this is very similar to what he did in 2016 with the Muslim ban promise. And I don't know, do you think this is a big political unforced error or not?
Haven't seen it yet.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump to conduct mass deportations of Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio on Friday, even though the majority of them are in the United States legally.
I can say this, we will do large deportations from Springfield, Ohio.
The city has been at the center of a social media maelstrom after right-wing agitators latched onto false claims that Haitian arrivals were eating household pets. The majority of the 15,000 Haitians in Springfield are there legally. Trump's longstanding pledge to conduct mass deportations usually refers to those in the country illegally. He did not repeat the assertions he made during Tuesday's presidential debate with Democrat Kamala Harris that immigrants were eating dogs and cats. Mm-hmm. Those remarks have been widely mocked.
All right, but he did make this promise to do widespread deportations from Springfield, which I don't know. I thought that was pretty remarkable, and this is the kind of thing that I think that when people do get on Trump about being a scary political figure, I think that's kind of what they're talking about is stuff like this. But I don't know. I thought it was a little bit of an unforced error from him. Not even a little bit. I thought it was a big one. But you know, in the wake of the
is it an unforced moral error or an unforced political error?
Maybe both. To me, I don't know. I mean, look, he's always playing with fire with this issue, right? Because there's a moment where there's a real immigration issue, and if you go to these small towns, and this is part of the reason that I'm frustrated with some of the kind of knee-jerk reactions to the whole pet thing, is that they're discounting the fact that some of these towns really have changed quite radically recently. Even here in New York, frankly, there are whole regions of the city that are completely different than they were even 2 or 3 years ago. So there's clearly a real issue, but there's always an undercurrent of, are we going to make an appeal to, you know, like sort of the lesser angels of our nature to whip people up over it? And I think he did it clearly in 2016. Do you need to do it with this case? I don't know.
Well, as a political judgment, it will have to do with whether or not the people who he is trying to win over are upset about this business. Okay. So I would guess that for whatever reason, because he does have pollsters and other kinds of, analysts, he's decided that this is a winner for him. Okay. Maybe it shouldn't be, and maybe he should rise above it morally. At the same time, I'm in, the mythical Uber in Dallas, Texas the other day, going to my hotel, and I have an Indian immigrant driver. And the immigrant driver wants to talk about politics, but he's afraid to, because he doesn't know where I stand, like most of Americans.
Like everybody in this country, yeah.
So he has to throw out some test statements. And his first test statement is, he was just talking to his dad, and his dad really loves Donald Trump. And he was waiting to hear groans from the back seat. And I said, I'm a journalist. If what you're suggesting is you want to talk about politics, you should feel free to. I'm not going to judge you in any way. What do you feel? And he went through this analysis of the dogs and cats thing, saying, well, he's not really talking about dogs and cats any more than people, when they say it's raining cats and dogs, are talking about rain. He literally said this. He said he's talking about the cultural impact of, a third of the people in your town arriving from a completely different area.
Right.
And like, I got to say, like 5 out of 5 of my last Uber taxi drivers, he came out pro-Trump. So politically, he may be scoring points. Morally, it makes me queasy. It does.
Yeah.
I can't lie about that. At the same time, I live in a town of 7,000. And if 3,000 people were settled here, or 2.5, whatever the ratio would be, in a very sudden way, I would imagine there would be friction in the town.
If there were people squatting in my front lawn and that kind of thing, yes.
Well, it's a time of economic stress for people in places like Springfield, Ohio. And so, competing for jobs with a group that's just suddenly arrived en masse is going to cause friction. And historically in America is in some ways a story of immigrants coming, often being, suspected, there being competition for scarce resources, jobs, housing.
Looked down upon as lesser,
etc.
Right, yeah.
It causes all kinds of friction. Sometimes it causes riots. I would say that anybody who did this settlement pattern in a small town or small city, Ohio, might have expected there would be problems. The way Trump is exploiting them might be wise politically. It bothers me morally.
yeah, look, some of the language that he uses and promising mass deportations and, well, is it mass deportations? There are going to be a lot of, I guess that's what, see, this is the problem with trying to cover Trump. You look up the story, the headline, it says one thing, and then you watch the speech, and it's a slightly muted version of what they said. But one of the reasons I wanted to show that is because you asked about the Lester Holt thing, and this is what Holt said after the assassination attempt.
Today's apparent assassination attempt.
Oops, sorry.
Fierce rhetoric on the Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims about Haitian immigrants in Ohio. Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid
I don't have the whole clip in front of me. That's my fault.
So Matt, they're clearly saying that in some form he's brought it on himself. Okay, let's not mince words. That's what's being suggested. And back to what we just said, because I have another side that I could argue in this immigration problem, which is that when a few migrants showed up in Martha's Vineyard, they were gone in no time. Okay, yeah. And this is a little bit of a class issue, and I don't like the way it's reported, because a place like Springfield, Ohio, where people are stressed out, which is ground zero for the kind of decline of the American Rust Belt. Jobs are scarce, people can't afford things. And then a group comes in, and let's take away their race and their nationality. They're just very hungry for jobs. And they're also, if reporting is correct, eligible for a lot of state support that usual people aren't, thus in a fashion subsidizing their wages, making it easy to employ them for lower wages than the people there. Now, in the history of the American left, you might put the frame of scab labor on this and say, hey man, not that everybody's unionized there, but you're undercutting our wages, you're undercutting our way of life. There are a lot of ways to frame this that aren't racial, okay?
Right, and this was always, until throughout the Bush years, that was one of the ways that, kind of the progressive Democrats framed the way immigration policy was handled by both the centrist Democrats and by Republicans, is that the illegal immigration was somewhere between encouraged and tolerated because there was a symbiosis of interests there, right? Subsidized labor on the one hand, right? Sort of the kind of pro-union left, which didn't really have a huge voice anymore after NAFTA, but that was their position on this thing, right? But now,
but Matt, both of us, let's face it, live somewhat privileged lives economically, and these incidents, these frictions, these arguments are occurring in let's say lower middle class settings, and they're the focus of a lot of rhetoric from Trump and the other side, because I'm not sure that racism is really what is of the essence in the Springfield situation. I've done reporting on other communities in the Midwest that have suddenly seen huge importations that aren't natural of foreign, migrants. Sometimes to work in plants where, Americans are unwilling to work because they're like meat processing places.
Right. Yeah. That's where I did for chicken plants in Georgia, right? Like that.
Exactly. And so if I show some hesitation to just weigh in and sort of wave my sword around rhetorically and be a virtue signaler. It's because this is occurring on the backs of people who don't feel they're being protected and are vulnerable to, they don't give a damn, I don't think, finally, about the race of the people primarily. I think they're like, I'm now standing in line for social services. And I have a friend and a source who in New York City who has philanthropies which serve the black poor of Queens and the boroughs. And he tells me there's a real problem going on, major friction, because new Americans, as they have come to call them, are in line before the residents, and it's explosive. And am I to put myself in their shoes? I might see things differently than I would just looking down with a kind of heavenly moral framework on things.
Yeah, so we asked the question, like, they always talk about Trump is going to end democracy as if that's an established fact, right? And if you watch the videos of groups like Protect Democracy, like all these sort of either Reid Hoffman funded or whatever organizations, the ones that are connected to the NED, for instance, right? They have these videos where we're talking about the United States is going through a situation similar to places like Hungary overseas, where the script for canceling democracy is always the same. You raise, the autocrat comes in, raises suspicion of and mistrust of institutions. They create wedge issues to divide the population. Then they declare a state of emergency and seize power, and that's the end of democracy. Now, I'm bringing that up because that's the only argument that you can make. The two arguments that I guess that people make for Trump being the end of democracy. One is that J6 happened, right? And that he tried to reverse an election result. And the other one is this idea that he's going to whip up the passions of the population and create political violence. But
has there been violence?
Well, there's been violence in the other direction, certainly, right? You could argue that J6 was violent, but it wasn't.
Are we seeing anti-immigration riots in the United States?
No, we haven't. We've seen a whole lot of online furor. I'm just saying, Walter, this is the argument against Trump. That's what it is, right? So you do have to periodically stop in and say, is he crossing a line somewhere, right?
Well, so my legitimate criticism of Donald Trump, legitimate with me, maybe not with others, is that he is approaching real issues of economic displacement, of competition for limited social services in economically stressed areas. He's approaching it in the most, let's say, colorful way he could, rather than, I think, as other politicians might. But I have a friend, a journalist, Mickey Kaus, a Democrat, for whom immigration and welfare issues and poverty issues are at the very center of his thought, okay? And he would be absolutely as critical of what's going on in Springfield, but with a different vocabulary. Right.
And that makes sense. And if the politician could be more clever about it, I'm not sure that that's better than what Trump does. I just think we have to pose the question, right? Because I've been paying attention to his campaign all year, and some of the things that Rachel brought up are more in the realm of stupid than upsetting. But I thought the deportations thing was
the problem with politics. Is and I don't want to be a both sideser, but it's the problem with politics, is that the most active people in your camp often tend to be the craziest. I remember when I went to cover the Reform Party in 2000, also down there in Arlington, Texas, near Dallas, and they had a kind of mini convention. This was the remnants of the Ross Perot Reform Party. They ultimately nominated Pat Buchanan, which was kind of a move to the right from the Ross Perot era of the party, which had to do more with that giant sucking sound and labor, going south because of NAFTA. Labor politics in America and the politics of the poor and the middle class are very confused, and they're shot through with a lot of morality, a lot of grandstanding. But the fact is, wages aren't keeping up with cost of living.
Right.
The fact is that the protections afforded by unions and other things are not spread very widely in America, and are shrinking. And this is powder keg territory. Whether you want to talk about cats and dogs or whatever, it is something that people are obviously concerned about. And I see it out where I live in Montana, where it's not yet a big issue, because the numbers aren't big.
And this is why people, I got a lot of flack online for not weighing in on the pets thing, because I want to go to some place like Springfield before I say anything really about that. Like, how bad is it really? Like, I watched some of those town meetings and saw some of the people complaining about what's going on in there.
Marianne Williamson, the former Democratic candidate for president, and I would call her one of the more liberal candidates on the slate,
for sure, yeah,
tweeted that this was a big mistake to focus on this. And you know what she brought up? Haitian cultural practices like voodoo. I mean, now, if Donald Trump starts talking about voodoo, I promise you, Rachel will be all over his ass.
Right. Yep.
But, here was Marianne mentioning it. The truth is, culturally, and that's not it. Oh, we're back to Rachel.
She had Hillary on just a second ago.
Oh, okay.
Oh, she's going to come back. Oh, all right.
But I'm going to say, in a Newtonian universe, when you apply force, it comes out somewhere. And when you bring in a lot of people, and there's no argument that we're experiencing unprecedented levels of migration, and we're experiencing in certain places absolutely staggering levels, because I don't know that 20,000 people showed up in Springfield one by one because of, the landscape. There was some, there's some system of placement that apparently.
Right, and they were granted this status of legality that feels to me pretty dubious. But go ahead.
When I was a kid, I grew up in Minnesota, and just as I was sort of ready to go off to college, and also when I would be coming back in my 20s and so on, there was a huge surge of Hmong migration into St. Paul, Minnesota, and the rural areas, okay? The Hmong are mountain people from Southeast Asia who ended up here partly because of after effects of the Vietnam conflict. It's complicated. But in any case, they were very different culturally than Lutherans and Swedes,
of course,
and the traditional, white population of Minnesota. They were different than the black population of Minnesota who'd come up there for industry and, to work in car plants. And they had odd markets. They ate strange foods. And they slaughtered them, and they, did things that were so different. Minnesota was able to absorb them because it is a huge metropolitan area there. But in some of these cases, and I did hear, but, honestly, I don't remember hearing any anti-Hmong rhetoric, either politically or from people there, because there was something about the ability to absorb it, and something about Minnesota people being really nice that didn't but they did make a movie, if you'll remember, with Clint
Gran
Eastwood
Torino.
called Gran
Yep.
Torino that was about this very thing. And people kind of lauded the movie at the time because they thought it vented in a kind of realistic way some of the frustration and even prejudice that is unleashed in these incidents. So expecting that this stuff can happen without a political dimension and without a negative political dimension isn't being real about life.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those issues that I did a story. There's a chapter in one of my books about there was a town in Georgia where the sort of Hispanic population had basically a taxi service because they were being pulled over and deported because of this new thing that Obama had passed that kind of deputized all law enforcement agents to do immigration checks on everybody who got arrested. And so people would go off to work in the morning and they wouldn't know whether they would ever see their kids again, that kind of thing. It was pretty messed up from the immigrant side, but there was also this really sinister side angle from the employer side, because they were making use of basically like lower wage workers that was displacing the people in the community. So it was a complicated story, right? But without going, you can't really know what's going on, and without talking to the people there. And that's why this story has been frustrating to me. Everybody's making fun of it. They're instantly pronouncing things correct or incorrect without going,
Somebody has a comment here on the right. Where have you been, Walter? Hypothetical violence is violence.
Really?
Yes. ZG, whoever that is. I'd like to answer that.
Okay.
No, it's not. Violence, for me, is something that involves the physical, or at least near physical, conflict between human beings. Whatever hypothetical violence is, I've never heard about it anyway. I mean, proposed violence. Is somebody proposing violence? Is even Donald Trump saying, let's go after them? I don't think that's quite it. Here's the problem with the immigration issue in America. It was never adjudicated through the political system properly in the first place. So a lot of people don't feel that it's the result of their voting, their choosing, some reasoned discussion that was had and concluded in some democratic fashion. They see it more as a natural phenomena beyond their ability to affect. That's how it is. And if you think I'm describing it improperly or I'm immoral for looking at that.
No, I don't think so. I also think there's like a broader story about kind of displacement of labor, because all over the world, right, we're moving the manufacturing sector to kind of like slave labor zones, or there's other things that, there's wars in some places that are causing mass migrations, and we get people showing up en masse in countries as a result of factors that are really started by, in places like the United States or Britain. And we end up getting lectured by the same people who caused the phenomenon,
and who don't suffer its ill effects.
Right, who don't suffer its
ill effects. People in Westchester
live in these archipelagos in Westchester and the Hamptons and whatever it is, right?
The people who are most sure of themselves morally in America are usually the people who aren't affected by the issue about which they're moralizing. Right. Now, that's not to say that there aren't, in Springfield, Ohio, champions of immigration. There are. And there are people getting up there and saying, I am ashamed of our town. I'm ashamed of what we're doing. I'm ashamed we're not providing a greater welcome, or we're...
Some of the people complaining about this issue were saying that.
Exactly. So, that's real too. But finally, I will say this. issues of economic security are at the heart of this election, and immigration affects people's economic security. And I would say that one indicator of whether you find it upsetting as an issue is whether or not it's happening where you live, and whether or not you are
for sure.
and whether or not you are dependent on some of the social services that are naturally also necessary for the settlement of people. If you go to emergency rooms, if you are someone who is on some program of government support or assistance, and so on, you're more likely to have intense feelings about this. And Walter Kern in Livingston, Montana, can sit here and tell Donald Trump, listen, man, you're not. This may be an issue, but you're not playing it right. And I am saying that. Yeah, I don't like how you're doing it. I don't like how you're outlining it. There's a better way that is less adjacent to inflammatory emotion.
Yeah,
but I can't gainsay the fact that it's being addressed.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And on the flip side, right, the people who are absolutely the most riled up and obsessed with the idea of Trump becoming president being the end of everything, that in my experience, they almost exclusively live in places where they don't come in contact with any real social problems. So Trump becomes the font of all their frustrations about everything. The more you move into, like, if you live in New York State and you live in the Upper West Side, although even that's changing now with all the migrants coming into New York City, you'll hear one thing, and then if you go 100 miles or so north and you go to these places where you can't even deliver a baby because there's no medical services anywhere for 50, 100 miles around, then you'll start hearing a very different kind of tone from people. So yeah, I just think all this stuff, just to bring it all back, this idea that it's that intense kind of like Trump is the end of everything rhetoric, I feel like an obligation to ask, is there anything to it? And I'm like you, I see lots of things about Trump that I don't like, but I don't see that he's going to end democracy, right? But you're more likely to think that if you live in a certain place.
There are thinkers on the right who believe that America would function better as some kind of monarchy or some kind of corporate style organization with a board and a strong executive and so on. And there are thinkers on the left who think that America would best function as a kind of popular democracy, unlike that described in the Constitution, without the Electoral College, without 2 senators per state, without a Supreme Court so small, that it can that it can sort of tilt ideologically with just a couple of appointments. There are people who are critiquing the form of American government on the left and the right, that's for sure. Do I see Donald Trump as in the vanguard of any movement that even faintly institutionally capable of making these mass changes? I don't.
No, but on the flip side,
if this was a guy who had Google, Apple, all the military leaders, the media, and so on behind him, I might be a little more wary. But I see this as a basic populist insurgency of a kind that happens regularly in countries around the world that are experiencing some of the same stresses we are.
Right.
And though it can be argued that it could result in some sort of Peronist, populist, strongman government, I think that would last about 3 hours in America, because I don't see the guy as having lined up the institutional backing that those places do. Usually that happens with the support of the corporate sector.
Right. And this is what all the stuff that we talked about on the show at the end of the 9/11 show last week, is this sort of mass institutional movement to chip away at all of the various, liberalizing, organizations and the checks and balance systems of checks and balances. They've gone after, the First through Eighth Amendments pretty hard, I guess, except for the Quartering Act, right? And they scare me, right? Like they there's a lot of reasons that they scare me on the speech front, on the civil liberties front, on the enforcement front. You're right. I don't see Trump being able to pull that off.
Were there at the RNC a lot of far right street people out there protesting?
That was another thing. Yeah.
At the Democrat convention, were there a lot of far left street people out there protesting?
There weren't a lot. There was some
significant numbers. Significant enough that they got coverage, significant enough that they broke through checkpoints and provided a challenge for the police, right? America, I mean, I'm just a historian here in a sense, and a common sense person. We haven't even had so much as a tractor rally of the kind that they have in Europe or France or the Netherlands or Canada. We haven't had so much as one of those. Okay, January 6th, let's put a box around it. But you are not seeing, where I live and I go everywhere, proto-populist movements to sort of paralyze society or rise up against the authorities. It's just not happening.
No, but you are seeing full-scale efforts to try to revolutionize the way all kinds of procedures are handled institutionally, right, in this country, and we talk about that a lot. So yeah, I think you're right, but we have to ask the question. One last thing, Walter. We let this go.
Yeah,
Rachel's doing a thing from Russia with Lev, and we're not going to comment. I mean, is nobody going to comment on the fact that this is after the historic screwing up of that story by that network? I don't know. We've talked about that probably enough in the past, but I just thought, I almost want to watch it. I'm just stunned that she went through
I put my cards, I do too. I'll watch anything, especially when it involves this kind of rhetorical absurdity. But I put my cards on the table earlier and I said, I just happen to be one of those who doesn't believe that Donald Trump, if he wanted to, has the backing of the kind of powers and institutions within society that can lead to the rejection of to the overthrow of democracy. Now, I don't feel that way about the Democrats, to be honest with you.
No, because it's all the Michael Haydens and John Brennans and all those people.
Right, because I did not see a concerted effort to suppress speech, a concerted effort to team up with major communications companies and social media companies and so on to suppress the enemy. I didn't see it. I do see what I believe to be a far more ominous threat in the designation of politically frustrated or just, other Americans as domestic terrorists. I see a huge legal framework. We went through it the other day in our sort of post 9/11 historical lesson. And the trend in America is for the real institutions of Homeland Security, national security state, the big corporate state, especially the communications and tech arm of it, to all gather together and create a anti-constitutional threat to liberty as I grew up understanding it. And so, that's where I stand. And just as the not believing that Donald Trump was a Russian agent put me at odds with,
right,
the mainstream media, I am again slightly at odds with them in the sense that I am supposed to take seriously the risk of some kind of right-wing overthrow of the democratic institutions of the United States. I can't, but I do feel a lot of qualms about a one-party establishment reduction of our democratic potential.
So just today, or maybe it wasn't today, but very recently, the House Committee on Small Businesses just put out a report about the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. If you remember during the Twitter files, one of the things that I found was this big sheet of paper where it was a list of the contractors for this State Department agency that was in charge of counter messaging and basically kind of a quasi censorship agency. They listed 39 contractors, 36 of them were redacted, and I kind of went nuts and have been sending out FOIAs ever since to try to find out what are those names, who are they funding. Congress, this committee sent out subpoenas, and they've been unable to get answers from these people. They're getting answers like, yeah, we spent money on radio programs, and they spelled it with the British programs. They didn't tell them who, right? They said basically said our dog ate it. We lost those records. So you have these sort of unaccountable agencies that are doing things like funding the Global Disinformation Index, which downranks media organizations so that they can't get advertising. And surprise, surprise, all the ones that are the lowest on the list are the New York Post and the Federalist and all these other organizations. They all happen to be of one political ilk. And the ones that get the best scores are NPR and the Washington Post and the Atlantic, right? And that's politicized, policing of the speech environment. And not only are they doing it, but even Congress can't get any answers about how much money are they spending on it? How exactly we have to find that out accidentally. That stuff scares me to death. And it's this whole packing everything into this opaque box that drives me nuts and freaks me out.
On a more thoughtful, considered version of America This Week, when we, tape it on Thursday and air it on Friday and talk about a short story and so on, we have followed deliberately, assiduously, I would like to think, and fairly, the extreme move toward censorship, threats to expression, kind of corporate governmental cooperation in extra constitutional or quasi unconstitutional endeavors.
Right, you're keeping people off the ballot, right? Doing all that stuff. Yeah.
And let's not forget why we're talking about all the things we're talking about tonight. We just had the second assassination attempt of the populist candidate. Okay. For somebody who's about to take over the country, he sure gets shot at a lot.
Right. Yes.
For somebody who it's about to take over the country, his security sure seems a little less than a Praetorian Guard, say, which you would expect from a future dictator. For somebody about to take over the country, he sure seems to be hated almost across the board by the global corporate media conglomerates that drive opinion, or used to in this country. For somebody about to take over the country, he doesn't seem to have a lot of friends among the rich, powerful, and Hollywood-style celebrity class, which you would think you would need. So with what power is he to do this? I don't know. We're speaking truth to power as journalists, and I think that's a great definition of what we should do. This is not where power resides in our country. Not right now. It's an insurgency.
Yep. The power that Trump has is his voters, right? But that's pretty much it.
And they don't tend, by any demographic and financial analysis of their makeup, to be the people who are in charge of America.
Right. No, they're, in fact, Democrats brag that they're not those people. Yeah. And the other thing is, look, we just had the second assassination attempt, and it's passed through both of our heads that might not be an accident, right?
You mean
right?
You mean what? In what way?
That these might not be lone nuts, right? So,
well, I think that's implicit in what I said earlier.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
That to understand these things as and by the way, Rachel started her strange free association binge there by comparing the Trump situation to the two assassination attempts on Gerald Ford. Okay, one of which was by a Mansonite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, until recently, with a book that it became a bestseller called Chaos, Charles Manson was understood to be the nuttiest, craziest, fringiest person that you can get in America, okay? There has been some revisionism of the Manson case, which suggests that he was known to the authorities and maybe even had interactions with them. You know, there is a lot of Manson revisionism, let's just be,
sure, yeah.
And it's a result of this book. And I really know all about it because the agent that is said to sort of been handling Manson in that book had a name that's familiar to me, Walter Kern.
Really?
Yes. Dude, I have had so many calls from people who read this Chaos book and said, hey, did you know that the apparent spy who was kind of infiltrating the music and counterculture scene and may even have been on the scene of the murders before the cops was named Walter Kern? And I could tell you,
that's amazing.
It is, except that in the book the name is spelled Kern.
Okay.
And this was, and they have identified this guy as an agent with a different name. That was his cover name. So why he picked it, except to reach forward in time and complicate my life, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to say that Rachel basically sort of made these two events seem like they are equal to these sort of 1970s nutty, half-hearted attempts on Ford. So she's already defining them as kind of freaky, but not politically.
Yeah, they feel a little bit more like the 60s assassinations to me. But
right. But you know, I've lived through all these assassinations technically, but I was somewhat aware of the 68 assassinations, you know, because the talk about them got into little, you know, 6-year-old Walter's head, and especially in the next couple of years. And, you know, and remember this went on to Reagan. You know, there was an attempt on him.
Mm-hmm.
But this is happening in the midst of the most fraught, most hyperbolic political presidential campaign of my lifetime, bar none, times 10. And to not note that is to not note the essence of the situation.
Yeah,
you know, Reagan was assassinated assassination attempt after he was elected. John Kennedy toward the end of his term, before he was able to run, as he was preparing to run for another term. Ford, you know, a non-elected president, kind of caught up, it seemed, in the chaos of the mid-70s and the decay of the counterculture. But two attempts on a guy who the establishment doesn't want to win and is totally open about that fact and compares to Hitler and is threatening, according to them, to destroy democracy, is not the same thing at all. And I don't know much about the McKinley assassination.
No, but it's a totally different thing. And, you know, the last thing I'll say about this is we didn't get a whole lot of follow up. We got almost none about the Crook story, right? It happened and nothing, right? Like it just died. And,
they cremated the guy,
right? And look, some of that's on people like us, right? Like somebody has to investigate these things if they're not going to do it, and we didn't do it. So, but it's not going to happen with this either. This is going to there's either going to become some accepted narrative about this, whether it's the Ken Delanian version that he was a Trump supporter, or the
stochastic. Now they're talking about something that isn't just stochastic terrorism. They're talking about stochastic stress. I mean, if I'm to really kind of try to frame what I just saw from Rachel, she's just saying like, it's a weird time, freaky time. Donald Trump is responsible for it being freaky. And he's getting some kind of karmic blowback from the demonic forces that he's released, not in a direct fashion, but in some, spiritual fashion or something.
Yeah, Alex Witt also on MSNBC, Lester Holt kind of had the same thing. So I guess the thing that we'll have to see by the end of this week is, does that become the party line on this assassination attempt or whatever this is? It's a result of the general heightening of tension in the population. That's actually his fault, right? That's kind of the line they're going with right now. So I'm going to bet that they will go there.
I'm gonna cough up another of my priors or my acting assumptions about politics and life in general. Whenever anybody says it's the culture of something that's responsible, or tries to assign collective blame or sort of spiritual, unfocused causation, I back up, because it sounds like what they used to call in the 70s a cop-out. Real people do real things with real reasons. They may be crazy, but nonetheless, just saying that things happen because the ether sort of collects a charge in certain bodies and they go off is, to me, the big cop-out of the news these days. We don't really need to investigate it because we know all the forces at work. Get on the damn job.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And, don't pronounce. I mean, this is how we do it. It's hot take sports journalism, right? Remember Jim Rome's whole thing: have a take and don't suck. That's what people do now. They just have a take immediately, and then
I like to think of takes as a provisional phenomena. You can have takes on the way to getting the damn story.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Takes are what you do while you're waiting to get the story. But something tells me that in the world we live in now, nobody ever gets the damn story. And the greatest irony of today was this. There was a report, I believe, released on the first assassination.
Oh, yeah.
Which has been obliterated by the news of the second assassination attempt.
Right. Yep. Exactly. It's trying to think of the name of the report. Hang on a sec. Yeah, this came out, the whistleblower report. And this is what it looked like here. Failures of the United States Secret Service in connection with the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump. That's something we can go through later, but you're right. It got almost no.
A whistleblower. It's like the Warren Commission report. Let's not compare them. They're not equal. They're not of equal gravity or import. But a whistleblower report comes out. The Warren Commission report comes out on the same day that there's another assassination attempt, and you don't really get it. When you.
That's this era in a nutshell, or as Austin Powers would say, how do I get out of this nutshell?
Well, remember back about a year ago, we used to talk about the never mind stories, how you never got closure on anything. Oh, what really happened in Nord Stream? Well, we don't know. Well, what really happened, with X? We don't know. Because
how did COVID start?
Yeah, at the point that each one seems to be moving toward closure, they tile or stack, whatever. That's my way of talking. History tiles or stacks another outrage on top of it, so that you never get back to the original investigation. It's like a detective mystery in which Hercule Poirot is about to crack the case when an even worse murder happens.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's about to crack that case when another one happens, and then you're like, will we ever get back to the first case? No.
Yep. I used to call this bomb holing, where you get a bomb, you get a bombshell, but you memory hole it by dropping another bombshell. And it's been the pattern really since the beginning of the Russia story, which is ironic because Rachel's still at that. But anyway, fascinating. And today, this whole thing, it'll probably be, there'll be dust on this story by the time we do the show this week. I'm gonna guess, but a crazy thing, and we'll see if anybody actually ever gets. I'm gonna guess you're right. This is gonna be a nevermind story pretty quick too. But anyway, any parting thoughts on today on this weekend's activities?
Well, like I say, my weekend's activities fell in the realm of Jungian synchronicity and a bit too intensely. There's a feeling in America, and you see it expressed in a lot of ways, of overload, okay? And you've got to wonder if in a situation of perpetual overload, decisions can even be made anymore. It's funny to me to hear these pundits saying, but what will the effect on the election be?
I know.
Well, maybe it will be this, that nobody will believe anything. That we used to think that if it's close, the other side might not believe it. But maybe if it's not close, they won't, because they have had their brains so blown out by the highest pitched rhetoric. It's like save your fastballs for, save your Hitlers.
You gotta get to the 8th inning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Save your Hitlers, end of democracy, multiple assassination attempts. Let's call it the God of history. Please save them, for later, because we are supposed to be right now, as the mail-in ballots are mailed out, making a reasoned decision.
Yeah, well, not a whole lot of reason going on, and not the greatest atmosphere for it, but crazy stuff. We'll see. Let's. I'm curious to see what happens by the end of the week. And thanks everybody for coming out and listening to us go on so long. And we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you then.